The billion-dollar mistake wasn't found by a team of Ivy League analysts or a high-frequency trading algorithm. It was found on a Tuesday night, written on the back of a dinner napkin, by a woman earning $6 an hour plus tips. Preston York, the ruthless CEO of Luminex Systems, thought he was playing a cruel power game when he decided to humiliate his waitress in front of a rival executive. He wanted to prove that brilliance is a birthright, not a learned skill. He asked her a question designed to break her. But when Diana Caldwell answered, the silence that followed didn't just ruin his dinner. It dismantled his entire worldview and saved his company from total collapse. This is the story of the question that changed everything. The air inside Le Ciel, Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishment, smelled of truffle oil, old money, and fear. It was the kind of silence that cost $1,000 a plate to experience a hushed, reverent atmosphere where the clinking of silver against bone china sounded like gunshots. At the best table in the house, a secluded booth upholstered in oxblood leather, near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, sat two men who controlled roughly 12% of the global tech infrastructure. On the left was Preston York. At 42, Preston looked like he had been carved out of granite and dressed by a tailor who hated wrinkles. He was the CEO of Luminex Systems, a company currently valued higher than the GDP of several small European nations. Preston didn't just walk into rooms. He occupied them. His eyes, a piercing glacial blue, were currently fixed on the man across from him. That man was Simon Bell. Older, softer, but with the eyes of a shark that had survived decades of feeding frenzies. Bell was the head of Bell Kovacs, the only competitor causing Preston to lose sleep. They were discussing a merger, but it felt more like a hostage negotiation. "The quantum chipset is unstable, Preston," Simon said, cutting into his filet mignon with surgical precision. "My engineers know it. The market suspects it. If you don't merge with us by Q3, Luminex is going to bleed out when that flaw goes public." Preston took a sip of his Pinot Noir, masking his irritation. Simon was right, but Preston would rather burn his headquarters to the ground than admit it. "The chipset is fine, Simon. It's growing pains. We're pushing the boundaries of physics. You wouldn't understand. Bell Kovacs is still refining technology from 2015. Simon chuckled a dry, rattling sound. "Arrogance looks good on you, Preston, but it's an expensive suit to wear." Hovering in the periphery of this titanic clash of egos was Diana Caldwell. Diana was 34, though the dark circles she carefully concealed with concealer made her look older. Her uniform was crisp, her movements practiced. She was invisible. That was the job. To be a ghost that delivered wine and cleared crumbs. She had been at Le Ciel for 8 months, a job she took because the tips were good enough to pay for her mother's dialysis treatments without needing a second loan. She approached the table with a bottle of sparkling water, her timing impeccable, waiting for a lull in the conversation. "More water, gentlemen." Her voice was soft, trained to be non-intrusive. Preston didn't look at her. He waved a hand dismissively, his eyes still locked on Simon. "Pour, and try not to drown the tablecloth this time." It was a jab he didn't need to make. Diana had never spilled a drop in her life. But Preston was feeling cornered by Simon, and when men like Preston felt cornered, they lashed out at the easiest target. Simon smirked, leaning back. "You treat the help like furniture, Preston. It's why your PR numbers are in the toilet. I treat people according to their value." Simon. Preston snapped, finally glancing up at Diana. He saw a tired woman with brown hair pulled back in a severe bun. He saw a nobody, a variable of 0 in his equation of success. Competence commands respect. Service commands a tip. There is a difference. Diana poured the water. Her hand was steady as a surgeon's. She had heard this tone 1,000 times. In her old life, she would have eviscerated him with a single sentence. In this life, she just nodded. "Is there anything else, sir?" Preston paused. A cruel idea formed in his mind. He wanted to throw Simon off balance to show him that he was the alpha in every interaction, that he controlled the intellect of the room. He wanted to make a point about the disparity between the elite and the common. "Actually, yes," Preston said, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. He signaled for her to stay. "Simon here thinks I undervalue people. So let's test that theory. A little wager." Simon raised an eyebrow. "You're drunk on your own ego, Preston." "Just a test," Preston said, turning his body fully toward Diana. The restaurant was quiet enough that the nearby tables stopped eating to listen. "Tell me what's your name." "Diana, sir." "Diana. Okay, Diana. I'm going to ask you a question. A simple logic problem. If you get it right, I'll give you—" He pulled out his money clip and slammed a stack of $100 bills on the table. It had to be $5,000. "This. If you get it wrong, you go to the kitchen and tell the chef his risotto is garbage, knowing it will get you fired immediately." Diana looked at the money. It was 3 months of rent. It was 10 dialysis treatments. She looked at Preston's cold eyes. "I'd rather just do my job, sir." "Come on." Simon goaded, amused now. "Humor him, Diana. I'll double the tip if he makes a fool of himself." Preston ignored Simon. "The offer stands. High risk, high reward. That is the essence of business. Are you a player, Diana, or are you just furniture?" The insult landed. Diana felt a spark of heat in her chest. She took a breath, tightening her grip on the silver water pitcher. She looked at the money, then at Preston. "Ask your question," she said. The tension at table 4 was palpable. Even the maitre d', a stiff man named Gustave, was watching from the podium looking nervous. He didn't intervene. One did not interrupt Preston York. Preston leaned forward, elbows on the table. He wasn't going to ask a riddle about apples or trains. He was going to ask something that required specific, high-level abstract thinking, something he used to weed out junior executives. A manufacturing plant produces a device composed of 3 critical components. Preston began, his voice smooth and predatory. Component A fails 10% of the time. Component B fails 20% of the time. Component C fails independent of the others, but has a redundancy circuit that activates only if A and B both function perfectly. If the final output requires at least 2 components to be active to prevent a catastrophic meltdown, and the redundancy circuit has a 50% failure rate. What is the exact probability of a total system failure? Simon Bell laughed out loud. "Preston, for God's sake. She's a waitress, not a statistician. You're just being a bully." Preston didn't blink. He kept his eyes on Diana. "Well, it's simple math. Logic. The world runs on it." Diana stood frozen. The numbers swirled in the air. To the onlookers, she looked like a deer in headlights. Preston sat back, satisfied. He reached for his wine, ready to dismiss her and collect his ego boost. "You don't have to answer, Diana," Simon said softly. "He's an ass." 14%, Diana said. Preston's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. The silence that followed was heavy. He lowered the glass slowly. "Excuse me, the probability," Diana said, her voice gaining a surprising timbre of authority. "It's 14%, assuming standard independent probability curves for A and B, but—" She paused, and for a second the waitress mask slipped, revealing something sharper underneath. "The question is flawed." Preston frowned. "Flawed." "The math is absolute." "The math is absolute," Diana corrected. "But the engineering isn't. You said component C has a redundancy that triggers only if A and B work. That's bad architecture. In a real-world system like, say, a high-load quantum chipset, you wouldn't series link a redundancy to the primary success state. You'd parallel it. If you built it the way you described, the heat variance from component A would likely fry the redundancy circuit before it ever engaged." She looked straight at Preston, her brown eyes locking onto his blue ones. "And if that's how you're building the Luminex Quantum 3? She added, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Then your problem isn't a 14% failure rate. Your problem is that the heat sink loop is in the wrong place. That's why your prototypes keep overheating in stage 2 testing." The crash of a fork hitting a plate echoed through the room. It was Simon Bell. He had dropped his fork. His mouth was slightly agape. He looked from Diana to Preston, and then back to Diana. The smugness was gone from his face, replaced by a look of predatory calculation. Preston York looked like he had been slapped. His face went pale, then red. The merger talk, the power play, the expensive wine, it all vanished. "How?" Preston's voice was a rasp. "How do you know about stage 2? That information was classified, top secret. Only the board and the lead engineers knew that the Quantum 3 was failing at stage 2 due to heat variance. Diana realized she had said too much. The adrenaline of the challenge had pushed her past the safety of her anonymity. She stepped back, clutching the water pitcher like a shield. "I read a lot, sir. Wired magazine. Tech Crunch. It's just a guess." "That wasn't a guess," Simon Bell interjected, standing up slowly. "That was a diagnostic. Who are you?" "I'm just a waitress," Diana said, her voice trembling now. "I have tables to check." "Wait," Preston commanded. He stood up, towering over the table. He looked at the stack of cash. He looked at her. "You didn't just do the math. You diagnosed the architecture. Who are you?" Diana looked at the money on the table. She didn't take it. "Keep your money, Mr. York," she said, "and fix the heat sink. Move the redundancy to a parallel circuit on the North Bridge. Otherwise, Belkovach is going to eat you alive next quarter." She turned and walked away. She didn't run, but she walked fast. She pushed through the double doors into the kitchen, the noise of clattering pans and shouting chefs washing over her. "Diana," the floor manager. A sweaty man named Marco barked. "Table 7 needs bread." "Where have you been?" "I need to go," Diana said, untying her apron. Her hands were shaking. "What, it's 8 p.m. on a Tuesday." "You can't go." "I have to," she said. She threw the apron in the hamper. She knew men like Preston York. He wouldn't let this go. She had exposed a vulnerability. She had humiliated him. But worse, she had shown she knew his secrets. She grabbed her coat and slipped out the back alley door into the cool New York night. She needed to get home to her mother. She needed to disappear. Back at table 4, Preston York was still standing. "Well," Simon Bell said, retrieving his napkin. "I think the merger is off, Preston." "Why?" Preston whispered, still staring at the kitchen doors. "Because if a waitress knows how to fix your tech better than your VP of engineering." Simon smiled. "Then I don't need to buy your company. I just need to hire her." Preston looked at Simon. The threat was real. "Gustav!" Preston roared, causing the entire restaurant to jump. The maitre d' ran over. "Monsieur York, that woman, the waitress, I want her file. I want her address. I want everything you have on her. Now." The address on file led Preston to a crumbling walk-up in Queens, miles away from the penthouse views of Manhattan. It was raining 2 days later when Preston's black town car pulled up to the curb. He hadn't slept. He had spent the last 48 hours tearing apart the schematics of the Quantum 3. He had screamed at his lead engineer, a man named Davin, who made $400,000 a year. When Preston suggested moving the redundancy to the North Bridge parallel, Davin had scoffed, then run the simulation. The simulation had worked. Efficiency increased by 40%. The overheating stopped. The waitress was right. Preston sat in the back of the car, looking at the rain-streaked window. He held a manila folder in his hand. Her name was Diana Caldwell. But that was just the surface. He had his private investigator dig deeper. It took them 6 hours to break through the walls she had put up. Diana Caldwell wasn't just a waitress. 7 years ago, she was Diana Kovacs. The name had sent a chill down Preston's spine. She wasn't related to Simon's company. It was a common name. But she had been a prodigy. MIT graduate at 19. A doctorate in computational thermodynamics at 22. She had worked for a subsidiary of a defense contractor, Aegis Corp, working on drone cooling systems. Then she vanished. The report said corporate espionage investigation, inconclusive. She had been accused of leaking data, fired and blacklisted. No tech company would touch her. She had been erased from the industry. Preston opened the car door. His security detail moved to hold an umbrella, but he waved them off. He walked up the cracked steps of the apartment building. The buzzer for 3B was missing the plastic cover. He pressed the bare metal button. "Who is it?" Her voice was tinny through the intercom. "It's Preston York. Open the door, Diana." Silence. Long, heavy silence. "I'm not here to sue you," Preston shouted at the speaker, uncaring of the neighbors. "I'm here to offer you a job." "I have a job," the voice came back. "And you got me fired from it yesterday." Preston winced. He had forgotten about that. In his rage at the restaurant, he had yelled at the owner of Le Ciel, and the owner, eager to please a billionaire, had terminated Diana immediately. "I can fix that," Preston said. "Open the door." The buzzer buzzed. Preston walked up 3 flights of stairs that smelled of boiled cabbage and old cigarettes. When he reached 3B, the door was already open. Diana stood there. She wasn't wearing a uniform now. She wore an oversized grey sweater and jeans. She looked smaller, more fragile, but her eyes were still the same intelligent and guarded. "You investigated me," she said flatly. It wasn't a question. "I did," Preston admitted, stepping into the small apartment. It was clean but sparse. A single bookshelf dominated the room, filled with outdated engineering textbooks. In the corner, an older woman sat in a recliner, hooked up to a home dialysis machine. She was asleep. Preston lowered his voice. "I know who you are. MIT Aegis Corp. The espionage charge." "I didn't do it," Diana said, crossing her arms. My supervisor sold the data. He framed me to cover his tracks. He had tenure. I was just the kid. No one listened. Preston looked at her. He believed her. He was a good judge of character, despite his arrogance. Or perhaps he just wanted to believe her because he needed her brain. "It doesn't matter," Preston said. "I ran the simulation on the North Bridge parallel. It worked." Diana didn't smile. Of course it did. It's basic thermodynamics. My lead engineer didn't see it. Your lead engineer is worried about his stock options and keeping you happy. He designs what he thinks you want, not what the physics demands. Preston felt the sting of truth. "I need you to come to Luminex. I need you to lead the Quantum 3 team." Diana laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. "You think I can just walk into Luminex, a disgraced engineer who's been waiting tables for 7 years? Your board would eat me alive. And frankly, Mr. York, I don't like you. You're a bully. You humiliated me for sport." "I was wrong," Preston said. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. He hadn't apologized to anyone since 2004. "I was wrong, Diana. I'm asking for your help. Simon Bell knows. He saw what you did. If he finds you, if he hires you, Luminex is dead." "Simon Bell is a shark," Diana said. "But so are you." "Yes." Preston stepped closer. "But I'm the shark that's currently bleeding in the water. I'll pay you. Whatever you want. Double Davin's salary. I'll pay for the best private care for your mother. No more home dialysis. Top specialists." Diana's eyes flickered to her mother, sleeping in the chair. The machine beeped rhythmically. The struggle of the last 7 years, the double shifts, the swollen feet, the fear of the medical bills weighed on her. "I don't want a title," Diana said quietly. "And I don't want to report to Davin or any of your board members. Anything. I want a ghost team," she said. "Off the books, just me and engineers I pick, junior ones, the hungry ones who haven't been ruined by your corporate politics yet. We report only to you. And if we fix the Quantum 3, you publicly clear my name. You use your legal team to reopen the Aegis investigation and prove I was framed." Preston extended his hand. "Deal." Diana looked at his hand. She hesitated. Then she shook it. Her grip was firm. "One more thing," she said. "What? Don't ever speak to me like I'm furniture again." The corporate headquarters of Luminex Systems was a 60-story obelisk of glass and steel that pierced the San Francisco skyline like a needle. The executive suites on the top floor were bathed in sunlight and cost millions to furnish. But Diana Caldwell wasn't interested in the view. Per their agreement, Preston had given her access to the Dead Zone, Sub-Basement 4. It was a dusty, windowless storage archive where old server racks went to die. It hummed with the vibration of the building's massive HVAC systems. It was perfect. "You have 3 weeks," Preston said, standing in the doorway of the makeshift lab. He looked out of place in the gloom, his Italian suit catching the light of the flickering fluorescent strip overhead. "The shareholder meeting is on the 24th. Simon Bell will be there. The press will be there. If the Quantum 3 isn't stable by then, the stock crashes, and Bell Kovac buys us for pennies on the dollar." Diana didn't look up from the soldering station she had set up on a stack of wooden pallets. She was wearing safety goggles, and her hair was tied back with a rubber band. 3 weeks is impossible for a standard team," Diana said, the smoke of melting solder curling around her face. "That's why I didn't hire a standard team." She gestured to the 3 people standing awkwardly in the corner. Preston squinted at them. He recognized them from their HR files that were flagged for termination. There was Leo, a 19-year-old college dropout who had been caught hacking the cafeteria payment system to give everyone free coffee. He was wearing a hoodie 3 sizes too big and was currently vibrating with caffeine energy. Next to him was Sarah, a structural engineer who had been demoted to data entry because she refused to sign off on a hurried blueprint for a drone chassis. She was 40 quiet and possessed a stare that could cut glass. And finally, there was Benji. Benji was a chaotic mess of a human being who had been working in IT support. Diana had found him because he had rewritten the building's elevator algorithm in his spare time to make the cars move 15% more efficiently, just because the waiting times annoyed him. "This is your team?" Preston asked, skepticism dripping from his voice. "A thief, an insubordinate, and the IT guy." "This is the ghost team," Diana corrected. "Leo sees code like the Matrix. Sarah understands stress fractures better than your entire simulation software. And Benji thinks laterally. Your current engineering team led by Davin thinks in straight lines. Straight lines don't solve quantum decoherence. We do." Preston adjusted his tie. "Davin isn't happy. He knows something is going on down here. He's been asking security for access logs." "Keep him away," Diana said sharply. "If Davin sees the parallel Northbridge architecture, he'll try to steal it, or worse, try to optimize it and break it again. This room is sealed, Preston. That was the deal." "Just get it done," Preston warned. "I've bet my company on a Waitress. Don't make me regret it." As the door clicked shut, the real work began. For the next 14 days, Sub-Basement 4 became a world unto itself. They didn't see the sun. They slept on cots set up between racks of servers. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone, stale coffee, and intense intellectual friction. Diana wasn't just the leader. She was the conductor. She pushed them harder than they had ever been pushed, but unlike Preston, she didn't lead with fear. She led with the trenches. When Leo got stuck on a kernel panic at 3 a.m., Diana was there, walking him through the logic gate by gate. When Sarah's hands shook from exhaustion, while calibrating the thermal paste, Diana brought her tea and held the flashlight. "Why are you doing this?" Leo asked one night, his face illuminated by the blue glow of 4 monitors. "You could have taken the money and ghosted. Why save a guy like Preston York?" Diana looked at the schematic of the Quantum 3 displayed on the wall. It was a beautiful, terrifying labyrinth of logic and physics. "Because it's not about Preston," she whispered. "It's about the work, and it's about proving that just because the world threw you away, it doesn't mean you're trash. Look at us, Leo, the dropout, the difficult woman, the weirdo, and the waitress. If we pull this off, we don't just save a company. We rewrite the rules of who gets to be a genius." Leo smiled a tired, crooked grin. He turned back to his keyboard and typed with renewed fury. By day 17, they had a prototype. It looked ugly. It was a mess of exposed wires, custom-printed circuit boards, and a cooling system that Diana had rigged using parts from a dismantled refrigerator and a high-end gaming PC. But when they powered it up, the numbers held. The heat variance, which usually spiked to 90 degrees Celsius within 10 seconds, held steady at 45 degrees. The processing power didn't just meet the target, it doubled it. "It's stable," Sarah breathed, watching the telemetry. "My God, it's actually singing." "We're not done," Diana said, wiping grease from her cheek. "Pack it up. We need to move it to the main server room for the integration test. If it can talk to the main grid without melting, we win." But they had made a mistake. They had underestimated the paranoia of the man upstairs. Davin, the VP of Engineering, hadn't just been asking for access logs. He had been bribing the night security shift. As Diana and her team rolled the cart containing the prototype toward the freight elevator, the doors slid open. Davin stood there, flanked by 3 security guards and Preston York. Davin was a tall, sleek man who wore turtlenecks to look like Steve Jobs, but lacked the vision. His face was twisted in a sneer. "Caught you," Davin said. He turned to Preston. "I told you, Preston. They're not building a solution. They're stripping parts. Look at that junk on the cart. It looks like a bomb." Preston looked at the ugly wire-covered device. Then he looked at Diana. He looked told. The stock had dropped another 8% that morning. The pressure was eating him alive. "It's the prototype," Diana said, stepping in front of her team. "It's not pretty, but it works. The thermal loop is stable." "It's unauthorized hardware on company property," Davin snapped. "Preston, this woman is a liability. You know her history. Aegis Corp. She's probably stealing IP to sell to Simon Bell. That's why she's hiding in the basement." The accusation hung in the air. "Preston," Diana said, her voice steady. "Let us plug it in. 5 minutes. That's all I ask." Preston looked at Davin, his trusted VP for 10 years, and then at Diana, the woman who had served him water 3 weeks ago. The corporate world told him to trust the suit. His gut told him to trust the eyes that had solved the impossible question. "Let them pass," Preston said. "Preston, this is insanity," Davin protested. "I said, let them pass," Preston roared. "We go to the main server room, now." They marched to the heart of the building. The server room was a cathedral of blinking lights and deafening fans. Diana hooked up the ugly device to the master terminal. Her hands moved with the grace of a concert pianist. "Initiating handshake," Leo said, typing on a laptop connected to the device. The screens on the wall flickered. A progress bar appeared. "Loading quantum core. 20%, 50%, 80%. The room went silent. Even Davin held his breath. 100%. System stable. Efficiency 215%. "Impossible," Davin whispered. Preston stared at the screen. He felt a weight lift off his chest that he hadn't realized was there. 215%. It was a generation leap. It was victory. He turned to Diana, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "You did it." Diana didn't smile. She was watching the code scrolling on Leo's screen. Something was wrong. "Leo, why is the latency spiking?" she asked sharply. I don't know," Leo stammered. "It's not us. It's coming from the external port." Suddenly the screens turned red. Warning. Critical failure. Overheat imminent. "Shut it down," Sarah screamed. "I can't," Leo yelled, hammering the keys. "We're locked out." Sparks showered from the server rack. The smell of burning plastic filled the room. The ugly prototype shuddered, and then with a sickening pop the main capacitor blew, sending a cloud of black smoke into the air. The screen went black. System failure. Davin let out a short, triumphant laugh. "I told you she fried it. She just destroyed the main interface." Preston stared at the smoking ruin of his company's future. His face went grey. He turned to Diana. The trust that had been building was instantly incinerated by the fear of bankruptcy. "You said it was stable," Preston whispered. "It was—" Diana insisted, her mind racing. Someone injected a kill code. Someone overloaded the port remotely. Or maybe, Davin interjected smoothly, you just don't know what you're doing. Or worse, you did this on purpose. Sabotage. Preston looked at Diana. He saw the corporate spy. File in his mind. He saw the destroyed server. He saw the billions vanishing. "Get out," Preston said. "Preston, listen to me. I said get out!" Preston screamed, his voice cracking. "Security escort Ms. Caldwell and her accomplices off the premises. If they resist, call the police." "You're making a mistake," Diana said, her eyes welling with angry tears. "Check the logs, Preston. Check the external port. Take them away," Davin commanded. As the guards grabbed Diana's arms, she locked eyes with Preston one last time. "You're not a visionary, Preston. You're just a coward." Then she was dragged out, leaving Preston alone in the smoke with Davin standing behind him, a small, imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Diana sat on the curb outside the Luminex building. It was raining again. It seemed to always rain when her life fell apart. Leo, Sarah, and Benji sat next to her, looking dejected. They held cardboard boxes containing their personal items. "Well," Benji said, kicking a wet puddle. "Back to IT support, if they don't sue me." "They won't sue," Diana said, staring at the revolving doors of the lobby. "They don't want the publicity. They'll just bury us." "It wasn't our code," Leo said, his voice trembling. "I swear, Diana, the code was clean. The kill command came from inside the network. It had admin privileges." "I know," Diana said. Her mind was replaying the last 10 seconds before the crash, the latency spike, the external port. "It was Davin," Sarah said bluntly. "He was the only one with the motive and the access." "We can't prove it," Diana sighed. "He controls the logs. He'll wipe the evidence before we can even blink." She felt a vibration in her pocket. It was her phone, a text message. She pulled it out, expecting a message from her mother's nurse. It was from an unknown number. "Meet me at the diner on 4th and King. Come alone." "I know what happened." Diana felt a jolt of adrenaline. She showed the phone to the team. "It's a trap," Benji said. "Maybe it's their lawyers." "I have nothing left to lose," Diana said, standing up. "Go home. Rest. This isn't over." She pulled her coat tight and walked 6 blocks to the diner. It was a greasy spoon with flickering neon lights. She walked inside and scanned the booths. In the back corner, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, sat a man. As she approached, he took off the glasses. It was Simon Bell. Diana stopped. She almost turned around and walked out. The enemy, CEO. The shark. "Sit down, Diana," Simon said. He didn't sound mocking today. He sounded serious. Diana slid into the booth. "Here to gloat, or did you hire me just to fire me too?" "I didn't sabotage Luminex," Simon said, pouring sugar into his coffee. "I want to buy Luminex, Diana. I don't want to buy a pile of ashes. If the Quantum 3 fails, the tech sector takes a hit. It's bad for business." "Then why are you here?" "Because I have a mole inside Luminex," Simon said. "Business is war, Diana. I have spies everywhere. And my spy sent me a very interesting packet of data regarding the accident in the server room." He slid a USB drive across the table. Diana looked at it. "What is this?" "It's a screen recording," Simon said. "My mole had remote access to the security terminal in the server room, but not the camera, the console logs." Diana grabbed the drive. "It shows who executed the command. Better." Simon leaned in. It shows that the command was executed from a terminal authorized to user ID DVANCE01. Davin. Why give this to me? Diana asked, narrowing her eyes. This saves Preston. This saves your competitor. Simon smiled, but it wasn't a shark smile this time. It was a weary smile. Because I met you, Diana, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw someone who actually cares about the engineering more than the stock price. If I let Davin win, he destroys that. And honestly, I'd rather compete against a worthy opponent like you than watch a hack like Davin burn the industry down. He stood up and dropped a $20 bill on the table. The shareholder meeting is in 48 hours, Simon said. Preston is going to announce the cancellation of the quantum project and a merger with a Chinese firm to save face. Unless you stop him. I can't get in the building, Diana said. I'm blacklisted. Simon grinned. You're a brilliant engineer, Diana. Figure it out. He walked away, leaving Diana with the USB drive and a plan forming in her mind. Back at her apartment, Diana rallied the ghost team. They crowded into her small living room, stepping over the medical equipment. We have the proof, Diana said, holding up the drive. But we can't just email it to Preston. Davin intercepts his mail, and security won't let us within 100 feet of the boardroom. So we break in? Leo asked, eyes wide. No, Diana said, looking at the schematic of the Luminex building she had drawn on a pizza box. We don't break in. We hijack the room. The shareholder meeting is live-streamed, Benji noted, to thousands of investors. Exactly, Diana said. Leo, can you access the AV system of the auditorium from the outside? Not from the outside, Leo said. It's air-gapped. I'd need to be on the local Wi-Fi. Which means we need to be in the building, Sarah said. Diana looked at her old Waitress uniform hanging in the closet. The uniform from Le Ciel. It was black, nondescript, similar to the catering staff that Luminex used for high-end events. I know how to get in, Diana said, but I need you guys to create a distraction. A big one. How big? Benji asked. Big enough to pull security away from the service elevators, Diana said. Benji, can you hack the building's climate control? Benji cracked his knuckles. I can make it snow in the lobby if you want. Just make it hot, Diana said. Make it unbearable. And Leo, get ready to broadcast the contents of this drive to the main screen in the auditorium. And you? Sarah asked. What are you going to do? I'm going to serve Preston York one last drink, Diana said. The day of the meeting arrived. The atmosphere inside Luminex was funereal. The stock was in freefall. Reporters swarmed the entrance. In the auditorium, 300 angry shareholders sat in plush seats. On the stage, Preston York stood behind a podium. He looked 10 years older. Behind him sat the board of directors and a smug-looking Davin. Ladies and gentlemen, Preston began, his voice devoid of its usual charisma. It is with a heavy heart that I announce a strategic pivot due to unforeseen technical hurdles. In the basement, Benji hit enter. Suddenly, the HVAC system in the lobby groaned. The temperature sensors spiked. Fire alarms began to chirp, not fully going off, but enough to cause panic. Security to the lobby. Possible electrical fire. The radio chatter exploded. Guards left their posts at the service elevators to rush toward the emergency. In the chaos, a figure wheeled a catering cart into the service elevator. She wore a crisp white shirt and black vest. Her hair was in a tight bun. She kept her head down. Diana Caldwell was back in uniform. The elevator rose. Floor 10. Floor 20. Floor 60. The doors opened to the backstage area of the auditorium. It was chaotic. Techs were running around checking sound levels. No one noticed the catering staff. Diana pushed the cart towards the stage entrance. She could hear Preston speaking. "And so we must accept the limitations of our current hardware," Preston was saying. "We will be liquidating the quantum division effectively immediately." Davin nodded solemnly from his seat. Diana took a deep breath. She grabbed a pitcher of water and a glass from the cart. She walked out onto the stage. The audience murmured. Why was a waitress walking out in the middle of the CEO's speech? Preston stopped talking. He turned and saw her. His eyes went wide. "Water, sir," Diana said, her voice amplified by the podium mic. "Diana," Preston hissed away from the mic. "What are you doing? You'll be arrested." "You asked me a question once, Preston." Diana said, her voice clear and strong. She wasn't whispering now. She was addressing the room. "You asked me about the probability of failure." The shareholders whispered. "Who was this woman? Security." Davin shouted, standing up. "Get her off the stage. She's crazy. I told you the math was absolute." Diana continued, ignoring Davin. "But I also told you the system was sabotaged, not by me, but by the man sitting right there." She pointed a finger at Davin. "Cut her mic," Davin screamed. "Leo now," Diana shouted into her earpiece. Suddenly the massive screen behind Preston, which was displaying a depressing graph of stock losses, glitched. Static filled the air. Then a video appeared. It was grainy security footage. It showed a man entering the server room. The timestamp was 3 a.m. on the night of the crash. The man sat at the terminal. He typed in a command. The screen in the video zoomed in on the code. Execute thermal_overload.bat user. Davin_admin. The entire auditorium gasped. Davin froze. His face went white as a sheet. Diana turned to the screen. "That is your VP of Engineering," she said to the stunned crowd. "Deliberately destroying the company's most valuable asset to protect his own ego. He knew my team had succeeded. He knew the Quantum 3 worked, and he couldn't handle being wrong." Preston stared at the screen. He watched the footage of his trusted friend destroying his life's work. He turned to Davin. The look on Preston's face was terrifying. It wasn't anger. It was cold, absolute clarity. "Is that you?" Preston asked quietly. The microphone picked it up. Davin stammered. It's a deep fake. She faked it. She's a hacker." "It's digitally signed," Diana said, "by the building's own security server. Check the metadata." Preston looked at Diana. Standing there in her waitress uniform, she looked more powerful than any board member in the room. She had come back. After he fired her. After he humiliated her. She had come back to save him. Preston turned back to the audience. "Lock the doors," Preston commanded the security team. "And someone call the police. I believe Mr. Davin has some questions to answer regarding corporate sabotage." As guards moved toward a panicking Davin, Preston turned to Diana. "You saved us," he said, his voice shaking. "I didn't do it for you," Diana said, placing the water glass on the podium with a decisive clink. "I did it because the answer was right, and I hate leaving a problem unsolved." She turned to walk away, but Preston caught her arm. "Wait," he said. The room was silent. "Don't go back to the kitchen," Preston said. He looked out at the shareholders, at the cameras, at the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," Preston announced. "I was wrong. The quantum division is not being liquidated. It is being promoted. And I would like to introduce you to the new Chief Technology Officer of Luminex Systems." He gestured to Diana. Diana paused. "CTO," It was the job she should have had 7 years ago. She looked at Preston. "I have conditions," she said, her voice amplified for everyone to hear. "Name them," Preston said. "My team comes with me. The dropout, the difficult woman, and the hacker. They get full salary and stock options." "Done," Preston said immediately. "And," Diana added, "you apologize to me, publicly." Preston York. The man who never apologized looked at the waitress. He looked at the woman who had outsmarted him, saved him, and shamed him. He slowly lowered the microphone stand so it was level with her. He bowed his head slightly. "I'm sorry, Diana," Preston said. "I judged you by your uniform, not your mind. I was an arrogant fool. You are the smartest person in this room." The auditorium erupted in applause. It started slow, then became a roar. Diana looked out at the sea of suits. She didn't smile. She just nodded. "Now," she said to Preston, rolling up her sleeves, "let's go fix that server." The weeks following the shareholder meeting were a blur of flashbulbs, lawyers, and caffeine. The clip of the Waitress CTO exposing the sabotage went viral within hours. It was viewed 40 million times in 3 days. Diana Caldwell had become a folk hero overnight, the working-class genius who took down the corporate villain. But inside Luminex, the atmosphere wasn't celebratory. It was surgery. Diana didn't move into the corner office on the 60th floor. She refused it. Instead, she had the wall between the engineering bullpen and the executive hallway knocked down with sledgehammers. She wanted transparency. She wanted the engineers to see the suits, and the suits to hear the hum of the servers. "We are not a bank," Diana told the terrified board of directors during her first official meeting. She was wearing a blazer she had bought at a thrift store, refusing to let Preston buy her a wardrobe. "We are an innovation engine, and for the last 5 years, you've been running on fumes and marketing lies. That ends today." Her first act as CTO was to fire the entire middle management layer that Davin had installed sycophants who knew more about office politics than physics. Her second act was to promote the ghost team. Leo, the 19-year-old hacker, was named head of cybersecurity. He replaced the expensive biometric locks with a code-based encryption system that shifted every 10 seconds. He showed up to work in pajama pants for the first month, and nobody said a word because the network was impenetrable. Sarah, the structural engineer, became the lead architect for hardware. She redesigned the chassis of the Quantum 3, stripping away the sleek, fragile aluminum that Preston loved, and replacing it with a graphene composite mesh that dissipated heat 5 times faster. It wasn't as pretty, but it was indestructible. And Benji was given the title Director of Chaos. His job was to try and break everything they built. If Benji couldn't crash it, it was ready for the market. But the transition wasn't smooth. The old guard, the engineers who had been loyal to Davin, resented Diana. They whispered in the break rooms. They called her the Waitress behind her back. They questioned her credentials. One afternoon, 3 weeks before the official product launch, a senior engineer named Miller stormed into the open plan lab. "This is ridiculous," Miller shouted, throwing a schematic on Diana's desk. "You're asking us to reroute the power supply through the secondary bus that violates standard safety protocols. It's reckless." The room went silent. Miller was a 20-year veteran. He had a PhD from Stanford. Diana didn't look up from her monitor. "It violates the old protocols, Miller, because the old protocols assumed we were using copper wiring. We're using fiber optics now. If you don't reroute the power, the latency will kill the processor." "I've been building chips since you were in high school," Miller barked. "I'm not taking orders from someone who was serving salads a month ago." Preston York happened to be walking through the lab at that moment. He froze, his eyes narrowing. He prepared to step in to defend her. But Diana raised a hand to stop him. She stood up slowly. She walked around the desk and stood toe-to-toe with Miller. "You're right," Diana said softly. "I was serving salads. And do you know what that teaches you? It teaches you to manage 100 variables at once while people are screaming at you. It teaches you that if you mess up, you don't just lose a bonus, you lose your rent. It teaches you hunger, Miller. Something you lost a decade ago." She picked up a marker and turned to the whiteboard wall. "You think the secondary bus is dangerous? Let's run the math." For 10 minutes, she wrote. Equations flowed from her hand like water. She calculated the thermal load, the resistance, the electron flow. She dismantled Miller's argument, variable by variable, until the whiteboard was covered in red ink. "The safety margin on my design is 40%, Diana concluded, capping the marker. "Your standard protocol offers 15%. So Miller, do you want to be safe, or do you want to be right?" Miller stared at the board. He checked the math. He looked for a flaw. There wasn't one. He looked at Diana, his face flushing red. Then he looked at his shoes. "I'll reroute the power," he mumbled. "Good," Diana said, sitting back down. "And Miller, tuck in your shirt. You represent Luminex." From that day on, nobody called her the Waitress again. The launch of the Quantum 3 was the event of the decade. The press called it the Phoenix Project. When Diana walked onto the stage in San Francisco, not in a uniform, but in a simple black turtleneck and jeans, the standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. She didn't talk about stock prices. She talked about the future. She explained how the Quantum 3 would revolutionize medical research, how it could model protein folding to cure diseases, how it could optimize energy grids to stop climate change. "Technology without humanity is just expensive metal," Diana told the world. "We built this not to make money, but to make a difference." The stock didn't just recover, it tripled. Luminex became the most valuable company on Earth. But for Diana, the real victory happened quietly, 2 days after the launch. She walked into the private room at St. Jude's Medical Center. The room smelled of lavender, not antiseptic. There were fresh flowers by the window. Her mother was sitting up in bed, watching the news on a large flat-screen TV. The dialysis machine was gone. In its place was a small, silent box, a portable filtration unit designed by Luminex's medical division, powered by a derivative of Diana's chip. "Look at you," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face as she pointed to the TV screen where Diana's photo face was being broadcast. "My brilliant girl." Diana sat on the edge of the bed and held her mother's hand. It was warm. "We made it, Mom," Diana said. "No more bills, no more pain." "I never doubted you," her mother said. "Even when you were bringing home scraps from the restaurant. I knew." Diana rested her head on her mother's shoulder, and finally, after 7 years of holding her breath, she exhaled. 1 year later. The rain drummed a familiar rhythm against the glass roof of Le Ciel. The restaurant was as exclusive as ever, but the atmosphere at Table 4 had changed entirely. Preston York sat in his usual spot, but the hard lines of his face had softened. He wore a suit, but the tie was gone, replaced by an air of relaxed confidence. Across from him sat Diana Caldwell. She looked radiant in a deep blue dress, the dark circles of exhaustion long replaced by the glow of success. "To the anniversary," Preston said, raising his glass of Pinot Noir. To the napkin, Diana corrected, with a smile clinking her glass against his. They drank in silence, acknowledging the year that had rewritten their lives. But Preston seemed nervous. He reached into his jacket pocket and slid a thick, sealed envelope across the pristine tablecloth. "I have a confession," Preston said. "Last Tuesday, I bought the parent holding company of Aegis Corp." Diana went still. The name of the defense contractor that had framed her still carried a phantom pain. Why their tech is a dinosaur. "I didn't buy them for the tech," Preston said softly. "I bought them for the archives." Diana opened the envelope. Inside were affidavits, recovered data logs, and internal emails dated 7 years ago. "I had my legal team tear their servers apart," Preston explained. "We found the proof, Diana. The emails between your old supervisor and the foreign buyers. The wire transfers. He sold the data, not you. He framed you to cover his tracks." Diana flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. It was all there. Absolute, undeniable vindication. "The supervisor is in FBI custody," Preston continued, "and a press release went out 10 minutes ago. Your record is clean, legally, publicly, and permanently. You aren't just the waitress who got lucky anymore. You are Diana Caldwell, the engineer who fought her way back." Diana looked up, tears pricking her eyes. "You spent $4 billion just to clear my name." "I would have spent the whole company," Preston said, and the intensity in his eyes told her he meant it. "Thank you," she whispered, the weight of 7 years finally lifting from her shoulders. "There is one more thing," Preston said, his voice dropping. "A variable I can't quite solve. It's a logic problem. If a man who thought status was everything meets a woman who proves character is everything. And if they save a company together, what is the probability that they could be more than just partners?" Diana looked at him. The arrogant tyrant she had served water to a year ago was gone. In his place was a man who had learned humility, a man who had moved mountains to restore her honor. She smiled a dazzling, genuine expression. She reached into her purse, pulled out a black marker, and grabbed the linen napkin next to his plate. She wrote a single symbol 1. "Probability 1, she said, intertwining her fingers with his. "Absolute certainty." As they held hands, a young waiter approached the table. He was shaking, fumbling nervously with a corkscrew. I'm sorry," the boy stammered, unable to open the bottle. "I'm new." In the past, Preston would have snapped his fingers and demanded a manager. But tonight he looked at the boy, and then he looked at Diana. "Take your time," Preston said gently. "We aren't going anywhere." "What is your name, son?" "Michael, sir." "Well, Michael." Preston grinned. "After you pour the wine, tell me, do you have any interest in quantum mechanics?" Diana laughed, a sound of pure joy. The story of the waitress and the CEO wasn't just about a microchip. It was about the ripple effect. One question changed a life. One answer changed a company. And now they were going to change the world, one napkin at a time. They say that brilliance is like a diamond, hard to find and buried deep under pressure. Preston York thought he was mining for gold in the boardrooms of the elite, but he found his greatest treasure clearing tables in the very restaurant where he flaunted his power. Diana Caldwell proved that your current station in life does not define your potential. She showed us that a uniform can hide a genius, that silence can hide strength, and that sometimes the person serving your coffee is the only one who can solve your impossible problem. Preston learned the hardest lesson of all, that true leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about recognizing the intelligence in others, no matter who they are. What do you think? Would you have taken the bet if you were Diana? Or would you have walked away? Let us know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story inspired you to look at the people around you a little differently, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that touches the heart and challenges the mind. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that their big break might be just one question away. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.